David Lametti presided over the invocation of the Emergencies Act, which was later ruled by the federal court to be illegal and unconstitutional. I put it to you that if Jody Wilson-Raybould had been the Justice Minister in February of 2022, she would not have spoken highly of the truckers. She wouldn't have been an ally of the truckers. But I believe that same ethics and independence of spirit would have made her say to Trudeau, no, what you are proposing to do is illegitimate, illegal, unconstitutional, and I simply won't let it happen. But alas, she was gone by then, and crooked David Lametti pulled the trigger. Now, when that federal court ruling came out, David Lametti hastily resigned from Parliament in disgrace. And here is what we're talking about today. On his way out the door, as he ran out of Parliament, just as the lawsuits started piling up, David Lametti pushed the delete button on his official Twitter account online. You might say, so what? Good riddance. We don't need to hear from him anymore. Fair enough. But that wasn't a personal Twitter account. It was a government Twitter account. And it was governed by various rules about destroying public documents. You can't simply shred everything when you're out the door, nor can you delete anything in this high-tech age. We all saw it, but no one actually did anything. No one except for Rebel News, that is. We rushed to court with an emergency application asking a judge to compel David Lametti to stop deleting public records. We had a hearing very quickly by no one less than the Chief Justice of the federal court himself. It stands to figure, if you're suing a justice minister, you probably want the most senior judge involved. A more junior judge might be too timid. Well, that was a few months ago, and I'm happy to say that we have brought this matter to a conclusion. Rebel News, on its own, we had no interveners, took David Lametti to court and managed to get that crooked Trudeau cabinet minister to reinstate his Twitter account and to hand over files to Canada's Library and Archives. Joining us now via Skype from Calgary is the lawyer who did it. Scott Nicol joins us now. Scott, congratulations. It feels pretty good to beat the Justice Minister, and it feels even better to be the only people in the country who thought we should do it.
Yeah, hey, it's always good to connect, Ezra, and this has been a good outcome, I think, for all Canadians in terms of transparency, access to information, and accountability of public officials.
Now, I gave a big sweeping story there, but can you fill in some of the details about the court procedure itself? How many hearings were there? And after a while, it sort of broke out into negotiations, didn't it? Because Lametti didn't actually want to give his records back to the government. He tried to wriggle out of that so many ways. Give our viewers sort of a behind the scenes. How many hearings were there? And then what happened in that three-way negotiation between you, on behalf of Rebel News, Lametti, who is now at a private law firm, and the government of Canada, which was fighting us too?
Well, there's a few hearings. I don't want to quote the exact number and be wrong off the top of my head. A number of them are scheduling hearings and determining the urgency, and then a substantive hearing addressing what would happen with this matter. And of course, at each hearing, the government shows up with a number of lawyers, and Mr. Lametti has a number of undoubtedly taxpayer-funded lawyers supporting him as well. What's panned out is ultimately a resolution where Mr. Lametti has agreed that the contents of not only the X or the Twitter archive related to his account that he used during his time as a public official, but also the information from his Signal account, which was used presumably for various communications related to his work during his public tenure, would be provided to Library and Archives. And that was all material that was at threat of deletion or other loss prior to Rebel's involvement in this proceeding.
You know, Signal, for those who don't know, is a highly encrypted messaging app. It's sort of like WhatsApp, but more secure. You can set a timer to delete messages after a week or 2 weeks. And it's where I think a lot of government decisions and chatter happens outside of the reach of the access to information system. I think that the Liberals, they're so crooked, I think they do most of their sensitive communications on Signal and simply never disclose it to anyone. In this rare case, we managed to freeze his Signal content and have it handed over to the library and archives. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. In this case, eventually, Mr. Lametti agreed to hand over the Signal archive to library and archives, and there were some details in there, frankly, a few periods of time where we were concerned that any incidental event could result in loss of data or be the reason that loss of data could be claimed. This is a new world that we're working in terms of communications. 100 years ago, virtually everything would be written on a piece of paper or some other record without cryptography. Certainly there's a risk of loss, but the fire that occurs at the same time that a bunch of papers are lost is somewhat suspicious. Now there's a whole world of data that can be stored on a cell phone, and with a level of cryptography or encryption that is essentially, if properly done, unobtainable without the password or the agreement of the person who's chosen to encrypt it. And that's the world. This raises new issues in how do we work with public servants and the public sector, the people that are supposed to serve us, be elected by us, and are supposed to be in service for us, and who should be preserving records of their work, when there is a plethora of tools that don't necessarily make it easy to archive those informations, or perhaps provide opportunity for people who would like to keep information out of the official archives in doing so.
Yeah, and I am absolutely certain with what we've learned today about the number of members of parliament who are colluding with foreign powers. I'm sure they're using Signal or other highly encrypted ads. They're not dumb enough to use regular email that is stored on servers. I want to talk about one more thing, which I thought was fascinating. This whole thing was David Lametti's fault. He was being sneaky, which is really his middle name. In fact, I think it actually might be his middle name. I have to check his birth certificate. He was sneaky, which is why he succeeded Jody Wilson-Raybould. He was sneaky, which is why he could delete his account as he left Parliament. And by the way, he almost got away with that. He was the reason this whole thing happened. We rushed to court using our own crowdfunded donations to pay for legal team. But in the end, the federal government demanded that we, Rebel News, pay costs to the government. If memory serves, I think they were demanding $10,000. They were going to insist that Rebel News had to pay the government of Canada $10,000 because we didn't get every single demand that we had made. We got him to put his Twitter account back up. We got him to hand over the Signal files. We got him to sign an undertaking not to delete things. So we basically got 90% of everything we demanded, but the government said, well, you didn't get it all, so you got to pay us $10,000. Tell us how that went. I mean, that's just so Trudeau, isn't it? How did that whole thing wrap up?
Well, I can tell you where we've landed is that everybody involved in the litigation, David Lametti and the government, have come around to saying, hey, there's not going to be costs for any of this. We had letters regarding that, a letter regarding that, as well as a discontinuance of the action filed yesterday, or sent in to the federal court for filing yesterday. And that the parties have agreed eventually to having no cost. But there certainly was a period of time where the government said, hey, you brought this. We would like you to pay for costs of this action. And that might be concerning to people who say, hey, if an independent organization is taking steps that result in the protection of information, certainly it was only after Rebel initiated this action through us that the X account was reinstated and the X account information and archives were pulled out of the deletion pipe, what we call the deletion pipeline, the more or less 30-day period after which X may expunge an account and its data. And it's only after that we started the action against Mr. Lametti, as well as the government, that account was reinstated and taken out of that risk. And after that, yes, the government's asking for money from Rebel for those steps.